My name is Danielle Cronenberg. I'm the program director for the RAMS Wellness Centers program. RAMS stands for Richmond Area Multi-Services, and we're a community-based nonprofit that's been around for 45 years, primarily serving, initially serving the Asian community in San Francisco, but currently more broadly working with diverse populations all throughout the city now. RAMS is an agency, again, serves folks all throughout the city of San Francisco. We also have one program based in Hayward in the East Bay. The real focus at RAMS is about cultural responsiveness, starting or branching from our roots serving the Asian community in San Francisco. We've only grown to really serve folks in different languages. I think we have 40 different languages spoken at RAMS and different cultures in all different milieus. So this particular internship is the Wellness Centers program internship, which is high school based. RAMS has another internship. This is not to be confused with that one. That is a APA accredited internship working with the severely mentally ill. This is a high school based practicum. We're working with SFUSD very closely and serving students that are enrolled in their schools. One of our primary interests is developing our trainees' clinical capacity and providing service in a community-based environment. Folks will have the opportunity to do a lot of assessment, a lot of individual work, and maybe some group work, especially now during this COVID crisis. I think, when we were in brick and mortar times, really the focus was probably more on individual therapy and maybe some groups and maybe some assessment. But now, given that so many families are choosing to engage in telehealth or just to engage with the computer or the phone or the services in such a different way, we're really trying to meet the clients where they're at. And so from this year's intern cohort, my understanding is there's been a lot of opportunity for assessment around needs, around tangible needs such as food and clothing and jobs and things like that. So some case management experience as well, but also, understanding how particularly this crisis in the world is impacting people maybe who in the past wouldn't have been impacted or who wouldn't have sought services, right? So assessing and figuring out, well, what is the right step? Like, do they need regular long-term therapy or even, I think of 8 months as short-term, quite honestly, but the school year is an 8-month placement. And so, do they need that, or do they need, more social contact and social skills or social support? Do they need a group? And so figuring out what is the right fit for somebody at this time is definitely a part of the internship experience this year. Definitely groups are possible now as well, because again, looking to provide and meet students where they're at, a lot of them are suffering from just isolation. Those who are engaging are feeling pretty, cut off from their peers, and adolescence is such a time of connecting with peers. And so facilitating some social groups to pave the path or lead the way in for a more intimate therapeutic connection maybe is one other thing that our interns may be participating in, as well as mindfulness groups and groups for students who are making the transition from 8th grade to high school is another group that I've understand that our interns are participating in this year. In brick and mortar and in COVID times, assessments come through the school wellness coordinator. So one of the wonderful things about working as an intern in a school-based setting is that you're never alone, and it is a team approach. So you, as an intern, would have the opportunity to develop your collaboration skills, understand what it's like to be part of a team, a multidisciplinary team with different approaches. The team includes a school social worker who's called the wellness coordinator, a school nurse, a community health outreach worker who is plays a big case management role, but in a brick and mortar space would also serve as kind of a gatekeeper, like literally at the door, like telling kids like, you should perhaps come back when you have a pass, or, oh my goodness, you're bleeding, you go see the nurse, or, oh, you're crying, go talk to the therapist, right? So here's this team that we're surrounded by, again, in brick and mortar times. At this time, everything is of course remote, and the team still does meet virtually on Zoom or Hangouts or whatever the platform is. And there are many opportunities still for people to be involved and connected with multidisciplinary teammates. And all referrals come through the wellness coordinator. So that is the school social worker who basically oversees all of the services provided, right? You as a RAMS intern would be one of many providers offering services to youth in the school. And the wellness coordinator is sort of the central hub that makes space for both literally when we are in space and also, figuratively when we are in this virtual space for whoever provides. So, as RAMS intern, you would receive your referrals from them, and you would have a lot of contact with them. So while we would be providing supervision, and I'm sure that's a question that we'll talk about, but you would also have this structure of having almost like a site supervisor, right? Someone who's always there that you can consult with, which is a real benefit for folks who are sometimes having their first experiences. It can be very nerve-wracking to be alone, and I imagine especially in one's own home at this point, if we continue with telehealth, that could be an advantage, right? Feeling like you are part of something and you always have somebody to speak with. I think another thing I want to mention about that is, and it's happening this time as well as in brick and mortar, which is that teachers make referrals as well. But the wellness coordinator will attempt to be a buffer for that. And so even though teachers may have your email address as an intern and may try to approach you, like we would provide training, of course, on like how to negotiate those kind of situations with our teacher partners. But school staff also make referrals, and those should come to the intern via the wellness coordinator. But and then many kids self-refer is the other thing, right? And during Zoom times or virtual times, the schools have set up virtual spaces for kids to convene, much like a wellness center space where like the staff are kind of hanging out, right? Just waiting for the kids to show up. And sometimes maybe they do, and sometimes they don't. And so if kids show up to this space and they're upset or they're crying, oh, can I talk to someone? Then they would create a breakout room, and a wellness staff person could talk with them. We have a RAMS staff person who would be kind of like a mentor for the intern as well. And so, there's ways that the contact happens and that the referrals get made that do mirror the brick and mortar times, but in this virtual space. The caseload is between 8 to 12 students is the ideal caseload for a RAMS trainee. And this kind of just depends on, the trainee's experience, right? If the trainee has had, either personal lived experience or other work experience working in community mental health, that they feel more confident and they want to take on more, that is certainly possible. If the trainee, this is their very first time sitting in the room, and we have both on our team usually, right? Folks who they've never sat in the room, they've never done therapy. And for that person, again, we really want to support them to learn and to grow and to not feel overwhelmed. And so for that person, we might have closer to an 8 count caseload. Other reasons it might vary are depending on what other activities the trainee is involved with. Again, so if a trainee is involved with a group, that takes up a lot of time in terms of planning and organizing, communicating with the co-facilitator, a lot of debriefing time afterward, pre-assessment time. So things like this can alter the caseload, but roughly it's 8 to 12 students. We provide 1 hour weekly of individual supervision and 2 hours of group supervision weekly. This is sort of the backbone of the support. As mentioned, the wellness coordinator is a person who, certainly the interns have a lot of contact and connection with their supervisors, but I think there's also this very developed and strong connection, almost maybe more so, or it feels that way because again, they're really working hand in hand with this team at SFUSD, who are often licensed staff. If not, then they are at least master's level staff or social workers. And so, again, a lot of support. The other support that is available, again, it's not BBS clinical supervision, but each school site has a RAMS staff person, again, who is master's level or sometimes licensed, who we consider to be a mentor to the intern. So questions, obviously if there were some kind of emergency, we would expect that the intern seek guidance from their clinical supervisor, not the SFUSD person, but their actual RAMS clinical supervisor. But questions like, what's been your experience in working with trans folks in this school, or what's been your experience in working with eating disorders here, right? Things like, general questions. The RAMS staff is also a great resource and support for the trainee. So there is a pretty lengthy orientation period at the start. I would like to share with you a sample of our orientation training schedule, which really focuses on so many aspects, particularly as they relate to school-based work, right? Because there's something, when we're in school and learning about theories and doing therapy, oftentimes the assumption is, the 50-minute hour and a lot of containment, and that is considered sort of the ideal. In school, it can look a little different. And so we're really looking at it and training and orienting interns through the lens of like what it is to be a school-based provider. So that orientation usually takes place parallel with the start of the SFUSD school year. So for instance, if school were to start August 17th, so would orientation for trainees start that week. It would be 2 full days intensive per week for about 3 to 4 weeks, and covering topics such as confidentiality, differences between HIPAA and FERPA, common interventions for depression and anxiety in a school-based setting, collaborating with teachers, things like this. And so the trainee wouldn't see clients actually until completing or near completing this orientation. About 2 weeks into the orientation process, trainees are introduced to their sites and start to get familiar with the processes there, like, certain paperwork requirements for the school, things like that, who to contact in certain situations, things like that. And then clients would start being assigned a couple of weeks in. And the orientation part finishes. And then we have just once weekly training on Fridays. So Fridays is a mandatory day for any intern. 9 a.m. to 11 is generally our training period. We have weekly 2-hour trainings, various topics. Again, today we had a training on working with immigrant youth in the high school setting. A couple weeks ago, we had consultation and collateral work with teachers. A couple weeks from now, we're going to have engaging families within the school system. And so again, all through the lens of what it is to be a school-based clinician. Also on Fridays generally has been our group supervision. So training in the morning, lunch break, group supervision. So Fridays is the one required day. The rest of the schedule is up to the trainee and their class schedule and or other obligations they may have. I think somebody who is first and foremost really able to have some kind of grasp on their own cultural experience, their own intersectionality, how they how what they bring comes in contact with what the students will bring. San Francisco serves a hugely diverse population of students, and as such, openness to serving students of diverse ethnic backgrounds, super important. Another thing that I think makes for a successful trainee is a flexibility, right? Again, that sort of classic frame for the work that we are trained to do is, very much contained, and school-based work is a bit more systems oriented. And so someone who's open to a systems approach and someone who is flexible, someone who is curious about learning how systems and people interplay with symptoms and coping, I think that kind of person would do really well. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen in school-based work, or it can feel that way, right? As you're learning. I think one challenge that comes up for trainees is, understanding how much to involve their school counterparts, because as I mentioned, there's this feeling of a developed relationship with their school team that even again in COVID times, right? I think trainees feel more connected to their school site-based team as opposed to their RAMS team, which is not the same. I mean, they meet once a week and for many hours on Fridays, right? So they are connected with their cohort, but as far as the broader RAMS team, I think oftentimes people feel like they are more connected with school. So then thus comes up these questions of like, well, client has shared with me very deeply personal information, and now that here's a team member who's asking me about it, like, how much should I share with them, right? Is it appropriate to share? Does it serve my client to share? And so this is a challenge, but I think it's one that is learnable, right? These are things that are skills that can be developed and taught. And so if someone, again, is open to learning that, I think it is less of a deal breaker, I would think, and just more of a nuance of the work. The feedback that I have received from cohorts that I've worked with is that RAMS provides a very supportive experience, whereas there's different approaches for everybody, right? Some people would rather be thrown in and just like, okay, hit the ground running. And at this point in shelter in place, it's certainly been more of a slow build. But along those lines, we really allow and create a space for our trainees to think about, themselves and who they want to be as providers, who their identities are, how they want to develop, explorations for future. We provide a lot of, again, training and pre-orientation before connecting with the client. So people feel very supported. I think people also do feel supported by their group, right? Their sort of cohort. And I think there's, as I understand it, maybe some other experiences where folks won't come into contact with others in their learning, like at their peer level as much. And so I think just being able to bounce ideas off of their peers has been a really valuable part of the experience from the feedback I've received.